Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Biology Breakdown YouTube channel. Today is our first content-related video where we are starting off with plant biology, looking at the first land plants, which are the bryophytes. Starting off with our goals, we're going to describe the transition of plants from aquatic to terrestrial environments, analyze basic bryophyte characteristics, and then investigate the three phyla of bryophytes. Beginning with the transition from aquatic to terrestrial environment, plants transitioned approximately 470 to 500 million years ago, and they had to evolve modifications in order for survival to occur. These include epidermal modifications, mutualistic fungal associations, specialized cells for gravity and light, and vascular tissues. These had to occur because there's higher oxygen concentrations in the air than there is in water. Water is denser than air. There are differences in UV penetration, and there's also a variability in temperature and natural disasters, for example, forest fires. Looking at the epidermal modifications, these modifications were the most primitive evolutionary modifications. The epidermal cells evolved a waxy surface known as a cuticle, which is made of the molecule cutin made up of fatty acids in order to limit the loss of water and also protect the plant from UV radiation. UV penetrates the top 200 meters of water, so any aquatic plants that were deeper than 200 meters, if they evolve to transition onto living in terrestrial environments, then they need to adapt to UV penetration. Additionally, there are epidermal pores known as stomata, which also evolved to help take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis and put out oxygen into the environment. Looking at this image right here, this is a cross-section of a leaf, and so we can see that the cuticle is at the top right here, and then the epidermis is directly below it, so the epidermis is what is secreting the cuticle, or this waxy surface layer. Next, moving on to the mutualistic fungal associations. These are known as mycorrhizal fungi associations, which are beneficial or can be mutualistic associations between the plant roots and the fungi in the soil. So when we talk about mutualistic, it means that both the plant roots and the fungi are benefiting. So the fungi aids the plant in mineral uptake, which is a benefit for the plant roots. And the plant also gives the fungi minerals and amino acids to use, which is a benefit for the fungi. As we said previously, the bryophytes are the first land plants, and they have a couple characteristics that are important to them. Firstly, they do not have vasculature, meaning that they do not have any xylem or any phloem, which are only seen next in the seedless vascular plants. So because they do not have vasculature, they then directly absorb water, nutrients, and carbon dioxide from their environment via diffusion. Looking at this image right here, this is an example of diffusion. So this half is the higher concentration because there are more of these blue circles in this volume compared to this side, which is a lower concentration because it has less of these solutes in the volume. And as we can see, diffusion goes from high to low concentration so that over time there's an equal amount of solute in each volume, which is what we call equilibrium. Additionally, these bryophytes also have special fluid conducting cells. This is because, again, they do not have vasculature, so they need special fluid conducting cells in order to participate in the diffusion. We have leptoids, which carry sugars and organic compounds, and we also have hydroids, which carry water and minerals. Now, if you're familiar with plant biology, just the basics, then you would know that these leptoids, which carry sugars and organic compounds, are similar to a phloem in plants that have vasculature. And additionally, the hydroids that carry water and minerals are similar to the xylem in plants with vasculature. Lastly, bryophytes either have thalli or stem and leaf-like bodies with rhizoids. So this image is depicting thalli. They're broad-leaved and they're leathery. They have a leathery type texture. And then here we have the stem and leaf-like bodies. Looking at the bryophyte life cycle, it's pretty basic. There's an alternation of generations between a multicellular sporophyte and a gametophyte stage, where the gametophyte stage is always dominant in the bryophytes. This gametophyte stage is the sexual phase in the life cycle, and it helps develop sex organs to produce these haploid gametes, where the haploid gametes are the egg and the sperm. So once these egg and sperm gametes unite together, they can form a zygote, which is diploid. And this is because we have an N for the egg plus an N for the sperm, which combine together to make 2N, which is our zygote. The sporophyte phase is the phase that produces the haploid spores, and this is the non-dominant stage. It does occur, but it is the non-dominant stage. Okay, so looking at this image right here, this is the life cycle of an alternation of generations just in a basic plant, which works for our bryophytes. So we have our gametophyte, which is our haploid or 1N, and then we have our sporophyte, which is our diploid or 2N generations. And it's called alternation of generations because, as we can see, we go from the sporophyte to the gametophyte stage, and then we also go from the gametophyte to the sporophyte stage. Okay, we're just moving down a bit so we can see the definitions of mitosis and meiosis, and then we can look over them in the life cycle. Mitosis is a method of cell division in which one cell divides into two genetically identical daughter cells. So these daughter cells have the exact same genetic makeup as the parent. And if we look on our life cycle diagram, we see that mitosis occurs multiple times. So there's mitosis going from the spore to the gametophyte from the egg to the sperm, and also from the zygote to the embryo. Okay, so let's talk about this. In our sporophyte phase, we know it produces haploid spores, and these are N meaning haploid. So these spores are created and then mitosis occurs. So each spore ends up splitting into two genetically identical spores, which make up these gametophytes. And then these gametophytes additionally continue to go under mitosis to develop into egg and sperm, which again are haploid because nothing is changing. In mitosis, like we said, the DNA is genetically identical. So going from spore to gametophyte to specifically egg and sperm, it all has the exact same genetic makeup. Now looking at meiosis. Meiosis is a method of cell division in which one cell can divide into 4 daughter cells, each with half the number of chromosomes. So the daughter cells are not genetically identical to the parent cell because they only have half the number of chromosomes. Looking at our diagram, we can see that meiosis only occurs one time, and that's through the transition between the sporophyte and the gametophyte stage. So I'm redrawing this arrow to show the change between the sporophyte and gametophyte where meiosis occurs. This makes sense because if we look at our sporophyte phase, we know it is 2N, and when meiosis occurs, the daughter cells have half the number of chromosomes. So if we divide this by 2, which is a half, then we will have just N, which makes sense because now our gametophyte stage is N. Like I said previously, there are 3 phyla that make up the bryophytes. Starting off with the liverworts, these are known scientifically as Hepaticophyta. These are the earliest land plants and have the most basic body structure. They lack stomata, which helps to transfer gases and oxygen in and out of the leaf for photosynthesis. And they can also use gemmules for asexual reproduction, and they are the only phyla in the bryophytes that can use these gemmules. Next, we have the mosses, also known scientifically as Bryophyta. They have a more primitive sporophyte phase in comparison to the liverworts. They're about 1 cell thick in a majority of the areas, and they also have no gemmules for asexual reproduction. Instead, they just use fragmentation for asexual reproduction. Lastly, we have the hornworts, known scientifically as the Anthocerophyta. They share a recent common ancestor with the seedless vascular plants, and they also have a protruding sporophyte area. Right here is our thalli, and then these things sticking out are our sporophyte phase. Okay, and here's just a little chart to help us summarize some of the important traits that bryophytes have. So starting off with Antheridia. Antheridia is a haploid organ that produces the male gametes. So this is the structure that produces the sperm, and bryophytes do have these. Next, we have the Archegonia, which is similar in that it is a haploid organ structure that produces female gametes. And the bryophytes also contain these. And lastly, bryophytes do have flagellated sperm.